Good afternoon. My name is Kemp and I'm Editorial Director of Creativebrief. And today, in the latest instalment of our Creativebrief Explores series, we are talking with an agency and an organisation which has really made a difference to young people in lockdown. In a bid to give young people a much needed space to talk openly about their mental health, Football Beyond Borders teamed up with Dark Horses to create Football Beyond Walls, an initiative which used FIFA gaming as the icebreaker for difficult but vital conversations. The initiative launched with a 4-minute film starring professional footballer Cyrus Christie playing young people at FIFA, and it successfully shone a light on the fact that 1 in 8 young people in the UK suffer from mental health issues. To find out more about this brilliant work, it's my pleasure to introduce two of the brains behind it. I've got Jasper Kain, who is a co-founder of Football Beyond Borders, and Adam Burns, a creative director at Dark Horses. So thank you so much for taking the time out to talk about this campaign. So to kick off, can you tell us about this campaign and how it came about so quickly? Because I understand originally you were planning to do something around the Euro 2020 campaign, but you really quickly pivoted in this crisis. So how did it all come about? Jasper, could I kick off with you?
Yeah, so we've been in conversation with Dark Horses about engaging our young people in a creative project. And then obviously COVID happened, and we're an organisation, we work with about 1,000 young people each week. We have a face-to-face model working with young people in schools, particularly young people who are kind of underachieving and struggling in schools. And suddenly we had to pivot and we had to think about how could we continue to support young people in a digital age. And so we started off by running a series of interviews and focus groups with our young people and their families. And a picture quickly emerged that our young people really missed their friends. They missed contact with adults. And there was a real sense that they felt quite lonely. And coupled with that, we also saw that these young people had passions. And for many of them, their passions were things that they did with their friends. And then there was an adult world, which was something that was completely separate. And so we thought, how can we engage our young people, give them a sense of belonging so that they can overcome this sense of loneliness, and tap into things that they're really passionate about? Because when they're not having to go to school and there's not really that pressure that exists, unless you can tap into those passions, then it can be very difficult. And so what quickly emerged was that gaming is something that they absolutely love. So we thought, right, why don't we create a project? Obviously, we're a charity, so we didn't have the expertise to try and develop it into a story that we could tell or a piece of content. So that's really where Dark Horses come in.
Brilliant, thank you. So Adam, could you tell us a bit about Dark Horses? Because you guys really brought that creative expertise and also, really incredible speed of delivery. Can you tell us a bit about how you got involved and how you got the project off the ground so quickly?
Yeah, we'd had a relationship with FBB way back last summer. Kelv and a couple of other young people featured in our FA mental health heads up film. And we'd kind of been talking about little bits all the way through that year. And then I went to the showcase that they do every year, and it just blew me away. And I said to Simon, our MD, that we really need to work with FBB. And in the run-up to the Euros, we were going to look at a Euro 2020 campaign, and obviously that was cancelled. So when we got talking about the virtual school and FBB pivoting, me and Paco, my creative partner, and our friend Kev had this conversation about FIFA and growing up playing FIFA, and how some of your most meaningful conversations with your friends as young men, as we were, happened during that time. And we've done a bit of reading about it, and it was a true insight. I think young people, when they play, have that kind of almost detachment from what they're talking about, and it's like an open space. So with obviously lockdown, separating people from their friends, we saw that as a way to potentially open up these conversations and reconnect, and also bring to life what FBB was doing with its virtual school.
That's great, thank you. And you touched on the kind of issues that lockdown have created for young people, you know, the sense of isolation that young people and adults have felt in this crisis, but particularly for young people who are used to being at school, to being in their space with other young people, and particularly, you know, their local sports organisations that have all been kind of on pause. Jasper, could you tell us a bit about the work of Football Beyond Borders and how it's been impacted by the crisis, and how important it is that young people get access to mental health support?
Yeah, so we're an educational charity. We use young people's passion for the game to engage and engage them in their learning. And typically our model is it's a face-to-face model delivered in schools for 3 to 4 years every week. And we have trained psychodynamic counsellors that work with young people, really trying to get them to express themselves more, understand their emotions, and be able to express themselves. And football we see as the kind of Trojan horse and a way of being able to do that. We work within a context which whereby lots of young people are excluded from school. So school exclusions in this country have gone up by 40% in the last 3 years. So we really work to combat school exclusions. And prior to COVID, you know, our record was strong. 95% of our participants remain in mainstream education. And really, the relationships are at the heart of everything that we do. And so immediately what we saw with COVID was that suddenly that is cut off. And there's a lot of uncertainty in a young person's life. For many young people who maybe already in their life have had certain traumatic experiences, which have meant that they're not particularly trusting of adults. So a big thing for us when COVID emerged was, how can we try and give young people a sense of structure, give them a sense of routine and some degree of normality? And the only way really we could do that is if they felt connected with their practitioners, with the FBB staff who they know so well. So that's been a big thing that we've done. And I mean, I can go into more depth, but off the back of these focus groups that we held, we launched a virtual school, which is basically an offering which enables young people to access our services every day. Some skills-based learning, such as literacy, oracy, creative writing, but then there's also been other things which are just around getting young people to express themselves. And this Football Beyond Walls was a great example of that. And just to finish, the reason why we were so keen to do this is because one of the early problems that we saw is that young people, particularly the boys, they were staying up, some of them up until 5 a.m, gaming. And we could see how addictive gaming was. And we made a decision. And as a youth work practice, either we could just condemn it and we could tell them this is wrong, or we could actually meet the young person where they're at, which is kind of at the heart of any youth work practice. And we decided, no, let's try and really engage with them in a constructive and positive way and use the gaming experience so that it can be beneficial for them.
I love the way that you have used that gaming experience, because there's a lot of judgment around gaming. And at a time when people are so physically disconnected, getting that connectivity where people are is so vital. Adam, could you tell us a bit about the creative process? Because also, you know, you guys are physically disconnected as well, you know, obviously on a different way, but how did that impact the creative process, and how did you get everything signed off so quickly? Because, you know, it is an incredibly sensitive subject, and especially when you're using young people in the campaign as well. Could you tell us a bit about that process?
Yeah, I think a big thing for us was obviously it was going to be a tough production process, being unable to physically be in the room and shooting, which is we got outsider Simon Elborn and director Tom Day on board very early. I mean, they were in kind of the very, very early meetings. Essentially, we had an idea that we wanted to show young people from FBB engaging with a professional footballer and having a really open chat about lockdown, about how they're coping, about mental health in general, but also to show those moments in FIFA or any game where you have that interaction of a goal scored and it kind of breaks any tension, and then you continue talking. So to have that and create an environment where two young people who might not have been used to being on camera were ready to open up, that was kind of the real challenge for us. I think from the initial meeting to shooting, it was 3.5, 4 weeks. So we moved pretty quickly. And yeah, I think it was more, the big thing I think was creating that environment, and FBB, and we worked closely with the practitioners who worked with Freddie and Bland, who are our two kind of stars of the film, who know them very well. And I think it's just FBB's expertise in being able to empower young people to feel kind of open enough to have that conversation with Cyrus Christie. And also Cyrus Christie was a fantastic kind of almost like a host, although it was a natural conversation. Cyrus drove that conversation and really helped the two open up.
The young people in the campaign were so articulate, and that they're really sort of held together really well. And also I thought it was really interesting the energy of the gaming. We often think of gaming as being, and it sometimes is a very solitary activity, but there was a real relationship between the players or professional footballer or young person, which really brought like quite a lot of authenticity to the campaign. I mean, was that something that was really vital? I mean, did you film for a long time to get that? Because it seemed like a bunch of mates playing FIFA rather than, a celebrity playing FIFA with a couple of young guys.
Yeah, and that's exactly what we're trying to create. And we did shoot for much longer than obviously the film shows. We played 3 games for each boy played three games against Cyrus. And yeah, in terms of the energy, I think, yeah, they were just, well, I think what helped is we had a week where Cyrus met Bland and Freddie on Zoom calls, and we began to build that relationship with an FBB practitioner and our director present. And also Cyrus has a relationship with FBB that goes back quite a way. I think Jasper will be able to talk about that. But I think that helped as well. And I think being a London, Cyrus grew up in London, and yeah, he can kind of identify with a lot of the things that the young people are kind of living through. So that was, yeah, I think that all played a part in it feeling like you say, friends having a conversation.
And thank you. And Jasper, what is the importance of player involvement? Because it's such an interesting time in terms of, particularly in this crisis, there was a period in this crisis where football was being held up as kind of the worst excesses of not, we're all in it together. But actually, we've seen some incredible leadership from footballers, a lot of empathy and understanding of the struggles that young people are facing right now. I mean, what's the role of players and their importance to young people in terms of getting a message across or encouraging people to open up, of being real role models?
Yeah, I think it's interesting, isn't it? I mean, the first thing to say, it's fascinating the kind of some of the stigma that existed around footballers and the stereotypes, and actually they've really gone on a journey. And as a collective, it's been amazing to see them share their voice. And I think this time has forced us all to stop and to consider our place in the world and potentially our privilege as well. Now, a lot of players obviously come from underprivileged backgrounds, and it's really interesting, in a very short period of time, they suddenly kind of were propelled into this kind of place of stardom, and with all the trappings that go along with that. And so what we really do, and what's amazing to see, is act as a vehicle between players that now have a platform and have quite a lot of privilege that's been kind of given to them at quite an early stage in their life comparatively. And with younger people that are only, Cyrus is only 10 or so years older than Bland or Freddie, and we could have been their classmate and grown up in exactly the same community. So there's real synergy, and really what it's about doing is trying to remove the barriers that might exist to make it artificial. Now, if it's Cyrus watching them play football on the side of the pitch, and he's a professional footballer who's played, international football, there's a clear divide. And what was amazing, and what we always look to do, but why the gaming was so interesting, is because it was a complete equalizer, if that makes sense. And it was a very immersive experience. And that's all we want to do, really, is ultimately connect footballers who have so much learning, but are these inspirational characters, with younger people that are aspirational. Many of them are being stigmatized and written off because they're kind of, naughty in school and all the rest of it. And really provide a context where that synergy can emerge. And the gaming was just an amazing way of doing that. The thing about gaming is there's no barriers to entry. They're so low. Like I say, that kind of naturally quite competitive streak that all of the guys had, that was a real icebreaker. So it was something that was, really nice to see.
I think that the whole gaming space is so interesting because this period has seen all of us, regardless of age, spend so much time in front of screens.
Yeah.
And I'm a parent. I'm always, a little bit paranoid about screen time, but actually in this time have been paranoid in the opposite way. Like, are my children connecting enough with their classmates? And if they can do that on a house party app or whatever it is, then I'm all for it. And it's so interesting with a sport hat on as well, because so often we see sport as quite binary, like you either play football or gaming is taking you away from that opportunity to be outside exercising, getting fresh air. And I just wondered what your view was in terms of attitudes towards gaming, because, it in some ways, historically, gaming has been, the language around it in business press has been really similar to the language around, high fat foods or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Do you see this as a kind of reappraisal of gaming? Do you think post lockdown we're going to see more ways of using gaming as a way to connect? Because football is an incredible way to connect, but FIFA is arguably an incredibly powerful tool to connect as well. I mean, how do you guys see that shifting? Adam, could I start with you?
Well, I think gaming is growing massively. I think there was a stat that I think there's more games of FIFA played. There's something like 230 million games of FIFA played just on a Sunday. So more kids are playing. I think between 16 and 19 are playing more FIFA games, obviously, than they're playing physical football. So the only choice, I think, is to use it as a force for good, because you're not going to stop kids, young boys and girls from gaming. So I think the only approach is to look at how you can use it for good, how you can use it for connectivity. I think with our idea, it wasn't so much about talking about mental health right on the nose. It was more about showing that gaming is a good space to have an open conversation and actually start a deeper conversation with a friend. We're not saying that it could be used as a counselling tool per se, but it could be used as the first step to have a conversation about mental health is what I suppose one of the takeaways from the piece that we were doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think from my side, the first thing says, putting gaming to one side, we'd even say football, for instance, is a neutral tool. It can be used for good or bad. Football can bring out the best in humanity. It can bring friendship, motivation, but it can also lead to people being overly competitive, being resentful, So that's football. Gaming, similarly, for us, it's a neutral tool that can be used positively or negatively. What we found is that a lot of adults now, including myself, I'm not a gamer, And my approach to gaming was always, how can we limit the amount of time that a young person spends gaming? But actually, if you flip it and you think about how can we use gaming to engage young people and to support their development, it's a very different conversation. I think what we've seen is it allows young people to move away from the safety of their own home or family unit and to develop their own identity within the world. And actually, I would say a lot of, for instance, middle class people, that they send their teenagers, they go on holiday and they go skiing, right? And they're in a space there where they're able to take risks to develop, gain some sort of thrill or excitement, but in a relatively safe environment.
Yeah.
Now, for young people, a lot of them that we work with, growing up in kind of urban poverty, getting those thrills actually can be quite dangerous, if I'm being honest. Yeah. And gaming is an arena where if you engage with it and you have it with adults involved in it and understanding it, you can start to have those really teachable moments and those meaningful conversations which can help guide young people. And to exactly like Adam says, either we can just reject it or we can really embrace it and then try and harness the potential. We're really clear, gaming is addictive, right? And there's no two ways about it, right? And so you have to be able to build rapport with young people and have those conversations. We've picked up on something with our young people where a lot of them, there's a term for it, I've forgotten what it is, but where a young person just gets like a fit of rage when they lose, right? And they'll throw their controller. And for us, as a youth workers, that's an amazing teaching moment. Either you just say, I can't believe they've done that, that's wrong. Or you try and understand that and work the young person so that they can learn to become more self-aware about their emotions. Why did you become angry? Right, next time, what could you do? What techniques could you apply so that you can cope with that disappointment? Those lessons are then applicable when you get into the classroom or even into a work context. So for us, that's how we're kind of seeing it.
It's really interesting, and I loved the point that you made at the beginning of this discussion as well, Adam, around the kind of role of distraction therapy and the fact that people can talk more openly once they're engaged in doing something else like playing FIFA. I mean, what have you learned about both in terms of your partnership as an agency and an organization, and also the conversations that you've ignited through this campaign, as to how we can drive more meaningful conversations virtually, like in a virtual space?
Well, I mean, during lockdown is obviously quite a unique experience. There's been some great examples of it. There was a great piece I saw of a mum interviewed, I think it was on BBC News, about her son playing Fortnite because it was the only way that he could hang out with his friends. So there's 6 of them playing in a team on Fortnite. And it was just a way that they weren't allowed to see each other, but they were kind of out there expressing themselves in that world, which is amazing. So I think there will be hopefully more of this. Obviously, like Jasper says, it has to be kind of done and controlled in the right way. But I would predict that you will see more potentially charities or mental health organisations using gaming or virtual interaction as a way to kind of reach people. Yeah.
And Jasper, what are the plans in the pipeline to develop this partnership further? Will we see more iterations of this campaign? Like, what's next for you guys?
Yeah, so we're just about to embark on a virtual summer school where it's going to see young people engage in a range of different passion projects, one of which is a gaming project, which we're just going to embark on, and that's going to have 3 core features. So one is really getting young people to think about their environment while they're gaming. So what's the personal environment and how can they ensure that that's a calm place for themselves? The second is really exploring their passion for gaming. And then the third is really looking at the mental health implications of gaming. So working with our young people, thinking about how do you develop self-confidence, how do you develop goals stress management, visualization, and also exploring what motivates them. So really using the immersive world of the game to support them. So that's in the short term. Longer term, I think, you will see some big changes in terms of our model. We run projects with young people across the UK. Just last week, we were doing a still life art project where we were getting young people to develop doing sculpture from their bedrooms. And there was one boy who's on our programs who'd called in from Blackpool, which has the highest rate of school exclusions in the UK. So he was in Blackpool. He was chatting to young people on our programs from Essex. And then the footballer, Chris Smalling, who's currently out in Roma, joined, right? And they then presented their sculpture work and he gave feedback. And I thought to myself, this is really special because there is no way prior to COVID that young Alex, 13-year-old from Blackpool, and Chris Smalling in Roma would have ever been able to meet. So I think it's going to see some really exciting things where my hope is that the creative industries and charities like FBB and our young people work much more closely together, and we really break down those barriers because, we've seen a lot in the last few weeks with things like the Black Lives Matter movement, which have really demonstrated that, maybe a lot of industries aren't truly representative of the communities that they serve. So I can really see the virtual world as playing a role in trying to bridge some of those disparities as well.
That's such a good point about the sort of connectivity bringing people together more. It's really, really interesting. And also kind of the opportunity for the creative industries. There's a lot of organizations that are facing some real economic challenges right now. Adam, what's your view of the role of the creative industries in taking these messages forward and getting them out there and helping to ensure that connectivity and change happens?
From a mental health perspective?
Yeah, and just more broadly, the role for the industry here.
Yeah, I think the last few months the whole industry has taken a look at themselves and probably not liked what they've seen. So yeah, I think we have to be. I think a big thing is we have to be more representative in not just who we hire, but who we cast and the things that we make. From a mental health perspective, I think putting people up on screen who are is an unattainable lifestyle doesn't help. Doesn't help the masses. But yeah, I think we can be leaders in. I think for Dark Horse perspective, we're now working on another project with FBB, and we hope to try and forge something that's more longer term, where we can create bigger pieces of content that kind of give young people a voice in front of the camera, but then also behind the camera too, and expose them to people in the creative industry who they might not normally get the chance to kind of work with. So yeah, I think that for us is something big on our agenda.
That's really good to hear. And just to close up, because it's been really great to hear so much about this campaign, and obviously it's been a different process to usual. Everything is different right now. If you both had one learning from this campaign that will change the way that you work in the future, what would that be that you could share with us? Jasper, could I kick off with you?
Yeah, I think just remove the barriers to entry to showcase and champion young talent. To get a Fulham footballer playing a game console with one young person living in Thamesmead, another one in Croydon, and bring in all the film crews and capture this and produce it, and for them to have had such a meaningful experience would have been difficult, right? It probably would have ended up being too expensive, and we would have stopped right at the first hurdle. And this proved that actually, if we spin this crisis into an opportunity, there's some amazing things we can do that connect younger people, particularly those from disadvantaged backgrounds, with a creative industry that has an immense amount of expertise and does have a desire to want to engage, but often struggles because they've put too many barriers up.
That's a great point. And Adam, what would be the learning for you?
I think from a production point of view, nothing is impossible. I think to turn this around in 4 weeks, in the circumstances that we had, would have been, I mean, yeah, would have never been, never thought we would be able to achieve what we did. So I think going into that with every project now with a bit more vigor in terms of we can basically do anything. I also think I was blown away by both Bland and Freddie. I mean, in terms, they're 13, 14, I think, and they were just two of the most kind of open and competent young men in front of camera, and just gave, I wouldn't say it's given a performance because it was kind of an open conversation, but the way they talked about some of the issues that were covered was fantastic. And we probably haven't said enough about Cyrus, because there was just never anything that was too much of an ask for Cyrus. And yeah, I think he not only could he bring that kind of authentic voice, and he's a professional footballer, hopefully about to be in the Premier League, but yeah, he was just brilliant to work with. So yeah, I think all around it was a really great project to be involved in, and hopefully there'll be more to come.
That's great to hear. Thank you so much for sharing all the inside information from this campaign. You know, I love how authentic it is, and it's one of those examples, you know, there's so much talk about authenticity in marketing, and actually having people talk about their lived experience is so authentic and powerful. And I really hope that the next stage of the campaign is just as good as the first. So thank you so much for chatting to us, and thank you everyone for tuning in. We will be back with the next in our series of CB Explores Online. So thank you so much for joining us. Thank you.